they are our speakers for this evening, so they are camp alums and also folks that are still very deeply connected to CCEJ. So I think they'll offer some really cool perspectives as to kind of, the work when they were campers versus now. So yeah, I'll let them introduce themselves and hand it over to Desarie and then Daniel.
Thank you, Kathleen. Hi, everyone. My name is Desarie Gonzales, and I attended camp while I was in high school back, I want to say 93, 94, I was a youth leader. I went on to continue my work with CCEJ as a volunteer, as adult staff through the Building Bridges program, as well as a talk in class facilitator. I've gone through like the Heart to Heart program, and I'm now a board member for CCEJ for about 2 years now. It went by really quick. And do you want me to kind of talk about my experience now or just introduce myself?
We could do introductions and then
okay,
we can dive right in. Yes.
Yeah. And yeah, so I'm a board member, and I just love CCJ to death. And anytime they invite me somewhere, I'm like there if I can. I mean, I'm kind of a little sick right now, but I took some medicine and I'm here because CCEJ fills my heart. Daniel.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So my name is Daniel Solis. I'm pronouns he, him, his. I'm currently the Associate Executive Director at CCEJ. And I went to Brotherhood Sisterhood camp in, I think it was, June 1989. I think we had multiple sessions back then. And I think I went to the June one. And shout out to Kate Kalimquin, who's here, who also went to my camp. And we were like wonderful introverts together. So just wanted to shout out Kate. And let's see what about, yeah. And so I actually also just in my breakout connected with Crystal, who went to my same tiny, small alternative magnet school in the middle of the San Fernando Valley of LA, where we also had farms. And so I never meet people from my school because there was only like 600 kids K through 12 that went there. So that was kind of like a miracle that we kind of ended up together. But yeah, like love the camp impact, and I guess I'll pause there before I get into the story sharing, but just really excited to be here and sharing space with you all.
Thank you both so much. And do you want to shout out folks, chiming in the chat? Please feel free to continue. I know as, Des and Daniel share their memories, stuff will come up for you. And so feel free to drop those in the chat. I also see some connections. So someone might have been maybe Daniel's youth leader possibly. So always lovely to see those connections. So feel free to shout those out. And if you want to, just kind of remember along with us, please feel free to do so. But Des and Daniel, if you all can share just kind of, what your camp experience was like, or what it still means to you. If you want to share a little bit about, who young Des and who young Daniel were entering those spaces, that's cool too. But would love to hear kind of just, what's your camp origin story, I guess?
So I have an interesting story. A few years before I went to camp, I experienced a loss. My brother was a gang member. My brothers and cousins were gang members, and I lost my brother to a drive-by shooting when I was 12 and he was 21. And there was at that time, there was a lot of Black on brown crime that was happening in Long Beach. And so I was in high school, and I was a little bit difficult, I would say, to teachers. And so I was in a high risk class at Wilson. They had this like experimental high risk class. And I was very vocal. And so one of the teachers, said, you have a presence and people listen to you. And I think that, I have something for you. And so I was referred to go to camp. And it was because of my outspokenness, and I think maybe she saw maybe some potential. I got sent to camp. And I will say that at that point in my life, I was very moldable, and I could have went a lot of different directions just because of, what I had gone through and just my surroundings and just everything that was going on. And so, I didn't go up to camp with many expectations. I just thought it was going to be a cool, weekend away. And it turned out to be so much more. the experience literally changed the trajectory of my life. I started to actually think about, my feelings and where they originated from, and, why I was feeling a certain way. And I confronted those things. And when I came back down the mountain, I had a different outlook on people, on myself. And I really took a look inside to understand why I was feeling the way that I was, and if I was projecting. And I made a conscious effort to try to be a better person and to get more involved with, my school community. And it really did change, even I think as a parent, because when I was growing up, my dad, he would make comments about racially geared comments about people of color. And and we had colored, people that were African-American friends, and my dad would refer to them as, oh, they were Black, but then other people, if they did something wrong, that he'd say derogatory things. And I'm like, what's the difference? He's like, well, they're not the same. Right. And so I started really questioning that, and I started pushing back on my dad and saying, you can't say that around me, that's not okay. And I became more vocal, even with my own family. And it really helped me to shape my children. And it changed the way I looked at parenting and how I got my children involved in not only racism, but even when it comes to, like, LGBTQ. My kids, they're very open, and I think that I know that it has everything to do with my experience with CCEJ and the continued education. When I went to camp, it was really focused on racism. That was the big deal. There wasn't a whole lot of, things around gender or even, religion. It was really focused around race at that time, because that was the climate. That's what was happening. That was the big deal. It was happening in the schools, was the Black on brown crime and, Black on white and all that stuff. But, as I've gotten older, CCEJ continues to educate me as a person on all of the different topics that are happening, within the social justice arena. And in turn, I'm able to, educate my husband, educate my kids. And really, it's a lifelong process. Like, see, your connection with CCEJ isn't just a point in time. What I love about it is the connection that I've had with CCEJ throughout the years has enabled me to become a better person, a smarter person, a more compassionate person, someone who can go out into the community and really try to understand what the true issues are that people are experiencing, and how we can make the world a better place. And it's very fluid, and it moves with the times. And so anyway, that's my experience with CCEJ. I really owe a lot to this organization in terms of, shaping me as a young person and helping me become a better version of myself. So that's my story.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Desarie. So I went to Brotherhood Sisterhood camp, which was run out of the NCCJ LA office, because back in the day there was multiple offices throughout the country, but here even regionally. And it was a 7-day camp, so we were up at Pilgrim Pines for a whole week. And every day, right, there was a different topic. But before I even got up there, right, there was the director of the program, Alicia Brooks at the time, who, if folks have met Alicia, is a powerful force of just good and truth-telling. And I was lucky enough that she came to my really small alternative school. There was only 100 and something of us in the high school part of the school. And she just talked about this this experience of to learn about, people's differences, to learn about communication, to get better fighting for social justice. And I had already at that point become very passionate about social justice issues. I hadn't done the deep work, right, that happens at camp, but I knew that there was problems in our country and our society that needed to be addressed. And I, was very passionate about those things. And just looking, I think, for something bigger than me, something to joy in, right? And, it also sounded like fun to get out of the house for a week. And it sounded cool. I'd never been camping, so let's do it. And I was just blown away by my experience there. It just, the way that like the community and connection and trust and like real relationships were built through like hard dialogues, right? They're talking about the real things that divide us, the real things that hurt us, the ways that we don't trust each other, the ways that like we're all just kind of struggling and trying to like be connected. Like that just kind of like blew my mind that like by facing the hard things is actually how we build real community. And that feeling, like when we were leaving that last day of camp, it was like it was just like this like feeling of connection, of community, and that feeling is still what I like. I always think I'm trying to get back to that, right? To that experience of like feeling like we can accomplish things together, we can change things together, we can transform each other. Just that feeling of so much power together, right? And with people who I just would never have thought that we would be so connected. It's still, you know, it's kind of still chokes me up, just that ability of like, of hope, right? That like, here is like a big part of the solution to the problems that we're facing in our world, in our country. And so I just got like, I don't want to say converted, but it definitely was like a powerful experience that like, I think looking back on it, I would say it was like a spiritual experience, right? And then I was lucky enough to be able to come back as a youth leader and be able to volunteer. It's kind of an annoying youth leader, as Amy, who's here, was a staff member, could I'm sure attest to. Always had an opinion about things and always wanted things to be changed. But I was just grateful for that ability to grow in my leadership, right? To learn how to facilitate, to watch people like handle some really hard conversations and do it with such skill and such power. I think for me, that was just like amazing, you know, and then I was able to continue on as an adult staff, right? Until unfortunately, NCCJ as a national organization collapsed, right? And thankfully, the Long Beach office was able to survive and continue on and become CCEJ, right? Which is what we are now. But it has, you know, it affected everything in my life. Like it affected me deciding to go to college in Ohio, the kind of college I found, like another super progressive, super social justice space. It affected my career path. Before camp, I didn't even know you could like, I didn't even know what nonprofits were. I didn't even know that you could do youth work, that you could get paid for like, you know, helping young people learn and grow, like that somebody would pay you to do that. And so it just expanded my world like in so many ways, like even just like the friends I was able to connect with. Like I grew up in the Valley, and you know, the Valley could be very sheltered and very cut off from the rest of LA and Southern California. But after camp, right, I had like friends in Long Beach, I had friends in like LA, I had friends like all over the place, and we would meet, we would like, you know, I would take the bus since I didn't drive, and we would just hang out. Or my friend Kate, actually, she would come pick me up all the way to the Valley. So shout out Kate. And just that sense of connection, right? That we wanted to spend time with each other, that these relationships mattered, right? And that these were safe places to talk about like questions about things going on in my family, things going on at home, right? I also was like, the time that I was starting to come out, right? Actually, camp was a huge part of me feeling safe and feeling proud and like supported to come out as a person, as a queer person. And even have that language, right? And even understand like a history of that, like finding a community of like, of queer elders in who were camp folks, right? I never would have had access to that. I never would have that like connection to that community in that sense of like that things are okay, right? When things maybe at home were not okay, and just like get that support. So, you know, I think that's all the reasons why I still stay connected. And when I was lucky enough to be able to come and work at CCJ, I like jumped at the chance because I see this like camp as this legacy, right? This that we all have to kind of just take care of for the time, and then we have to pass it on right to the next generation and get out of the way and let them run it. And I feel so connected to that legacy and history of like so many generations of people who've gone, who volunteer, who keep it going, who spread the word, and then we pass it on, right? And for the next generation to do the work that they need to do. So I'll pause there because I'm just gonna keep like rambling. So.
Oh, thank you both so much. Yes, there's tears and hearts and things flowing in the chat, so keep it coming. But just want to thank you both for sharing so openly and also speaking to, right, the things that were happening on a larger scale, and the fact that this small community, right, that we create at camp really is a demonstration that another world is possible, right, and that we can do a lot of work and come together and make a world better. And so I guess for you know, you both, right, are still very much involved with CCEJ, very much committed. And so curious to know what are some maybe threads that have continued to ring true since your first time up at camp? And what are ways that maybe this work or the world has changed that you're noticing, right? Like we might need to change along with it. So yeah, some things that are common or similar to when you first came to camp, and maybe things that have changed in this work that we're trying to do.
I'm gonna let you go, Daniel. I have to think about this one.
Okay. I mean, I think the thing that I'm grateful for how camp is able to evolve, you know, I think like when I went, you know, I was talking about, you know, coming out as being gay, as being queer. And I think now, right, the conversation has evolved so much more beautifully complex to talk about gender identity in a way that, like, you know, I feel like I was playing checkers and like now we're playing like 3-dimensional chess in this really awesome way. And like, and camp has evolved and kept up with that and helped cisgender youth learn about being, what does it mean to be cisgender, so we can understand how to be allies and supporters and take down these systems that are harming transgender and non-binary people, right? And that I think is something that, like, when I was a camper, wasn't even talked about, but now it's like such a core part of how a camp experience is. Like, you know, it's not just the pronouns, it's not just the gender, all gender, like bathrooms and spaces. It's really like woven into, like, we're going to talk about this. Everyone who's cisgender is going to have to reflect on that, and it makes me really proud of like that evolution, you know. I also think about like experiences for bi-multiracial people. Like when I went to the camp, we did not have a lot of room for that. So bi-multiracial people like even had to pick one of their identity groups to go into. And now I think we do such a better job of making space for bi-multiracial people and really acknowledging like the uniqueness of that experience, right? And like not just writing that off as like, oh, you need to pick whichever group you look like, right? Which is very much the message then. And again, all that comes from, I think, not just from like staff, but I think really from volunteers, from youth, right? Saying, hey, we need this space. This space is not meeting our needs. We need to shift and evolve. And I think that's one of the things that I'm most proud of at CCJ and in camp, is that we're so accountable and we still listen to young people, right, in a way that I think other youth programs don't. And I think we are always like trying to cultivate that. And when youth tell us something, I think we do a good job of being like, oh, we need to get it together because we're not like up to their level. So how do we do that? How do we shift that? What do we need to change? So those are just some things that I've observed over the years.
Yeah, I just have to echo what Daniel said, because I do remember one of the most memorable moments for me at camp was Four Corners. We called it Four Corners, and there was less there were less racial groups at that time than there are now. But there was not a biracial, and that the message actually in the middle was you have to pick. And so, you know, people and myself too, I at the time was kind of struggling, you know, anyway. And it's kind of hard when someone says, well, you can't be comfortable where you are. You just got to pick whatever, you know, applies the most. And so when I started going back to camp in the early 2000s as an adult volunteer, and I saw that they had included a biracial group, I was like, wow, that's definitely, you know, a lot different than when I went, and you had to pick, right? You had to, if you were black and white, you had to say which one you identified, you know, most with. And then I have to also agree with you, Daniel, on you know, the teaching about, you know, what even like what is cisgender, you know, what is binary. These are things that, you know, are not taught in school. And so that education for, I think, our campers is a lot, because, you know, a lot of times people they fear the unknown, right? And education and knowledge is power. And so I think those are, you know, fantastic moves that CCEJ has made in educating our youth. So I'm trying to think of something different than what you said, Daniel, but I really can't. A lot of the program I feel stayed the same, but there's been minor tweaks that have perfected, I think, the experience over the years. But I feel like the core experience still is the same, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Well, thank you both. And I wish we could just stay here all night. I'm so enjoying talking to you both. This goes out to folks that are with us as well, but would love to hear, and also take your time if you need the time, but what would you say to your younger self, knowing what you know now, being in 2022 right now, and having witnessed, right, the growth and expansion and transformation of CCEJ? What would you tell young Desarie, and what would you tell young Daniel? And for those of you watching, listening, what would you also tell your younger self?
So I think that I would have told my younger self to get more phone numbers and to really, keep in touch, right? Because we didn't have cell phones back then. We didn't even have, I don't even think we had pagers. To be honest, I think there was just, barely coming out. So keeping in touch with people was a little bit more difficult back when I was a youngin than it is now, right? I think I want to say that that one's a tough one, because I feel like my generation, like when we did something, we were usually fully present because we didn't have anything to distract us, right? So I was fully present. I didn't have a phone to worry about, or, social media or any of that stuff. It really was just being in the moment. I wish I would have taken a camera. I wish I would have taken pictures. I wish I would have gotten phone numbers. I wish I would have had a journal. I wish I would have had a journal. That's what it is. I wish that I would have journaled, honestly, because I can feel what I went through, but I don't remember all of the emotions that, my process. So I would say, take a journal to camp. That's what I would have told my younger self. That's it.
I think for me it was more like after camp, like after I was just like turbocharged on like social justice stuff. And for me, like the easiest way to focus that was like on like language and what people said, right? So like I'd always been like, hey, don't say like derogatory terms, don't say those things, those are messed up. But afterwards, like that those first few weeks and months after camp, it was like off the charts. And I think looking back on it, I wish I would have focused more on like not policing people's words, although like some words and like are effed up and should not be to be said. But I think focusing more on like talking about that feeling of connection, that feeling of possibility, that feeling of transformation of like the people that I connected with, and like sharing that more, because I think that that's the thing that like a lot of us are missing right in our society, right? And also I think that's where so much power for change can come from. And I wish I just kind of had gotten that a little bit more, when I was younger, and just helped share that more. Because again, I think that's like the real lasting change I think that came from camp was like the people, like the together, right? We can do these things. So yeah, and then journaling I think too probably was a good idea.
It's hard though, Daniel, because I think about that too. And like even as an adult, when I was, going as adult staff, I still had that spark inside. And it's really hard to explain to people. It's like one of those things, like you have to go through it in order to get people to feel that connection. It's the experience, right? Like if I had one wish, I would wish that everyone could do this. Like it was a part of our curriculum. It's something that you had to do, like back in the day when I had to do driver's ed. They don't even do that anymore, but I had to do a semester of driver's ed. I think that, this kind of experience every person should have the opportunity to go through it, and what they take out of it is theirs. But it's almost like, what you did, and you came back and you did all that you could do, which was police people, right? Because you can't spark that fire in someone that hasn't experienced it. At least I haven't been able to. I try to, get people to drink the Kool-Aid, but it's kind of like, it's one of those things that it almost has to be your own experience to understand it. That's just my personal 2 cents.
Thank you both. I know we're at our time per se. If folks are okay giving us some bonus minutes, we can share kind of to Des's point how you can remain involved. But do you want to see if Daniel and Desarie, if you have any last words to share with community? And thank you again for being a part of tonight.
I would just say that, in however, way that you are connected to CCEJ, continue to be connected to CCEJ. If your heart is with, Building Bridges Camp, if you went to Brotherhood Sisterhood Camp, you're never too old. You're never too, to come to camp, to be an adult staff, to go through the training again and to get involved. It is something definitely that it's still a wonderful opportunity. It's still a great experience. You can't donate your time, if you can donate your money, because sometimes that's all we can do. But this program, I think, is so important to our youth that, for those of you that love it, tell 5 people about it and tell them to come to our breakfast this year. Have them support the program, because this, I heard so many people say this program changed my life, and every child, every student, every even adult should have the opportunity to witness this and to be experienced. So, and we can only do that through all of our support. So that's my 5-second plug.
And that's why Desarie is our board member, because you are bringing it all home. Yeah, I just would echo, like, tell people reconnect, right? Like, this is a community, right? And CCEJ is like the custodian and the anchor for that community, but we're so much bigger than just the people who currently work here. And so definitely help reconnect, help us rebuild. And we're getting ready to come out of the hibernation of the pandemic. So it's definitely a good time to reconnect with us and help get young people having this experience. So just ditto everything Desarie said.
Beautiful. Well, thank you both. So appreciate you joining us tonight. And